hello to all my pretty painted lemons out there. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Anri and today we're gonna have a ton of fun. Now, this is probably one of the most frequent questions I get asked is how to mix color without getting like this weird brown situation happening on my page. And so I decided to do a little video for you to show you guys how I mix my paint colors. Now, I basically use the principle that we have been learned since we were in primary school, that color consists out of 3 primary colors. And something that I would really definitely recommend if you are interested in really growing your art is invest in a color wheel. You get very expensive ones, but I kind of like this one that I purchased from Montmartre. And the nice thing about it is you've got your primary colors. It shows you like harmony, it shows you grayscale, it shows you if you add white, if you add black, what happens to the art color that you want to mix. Art, color, art, color. Okay, so I have designed a little printable for you that you can download for free on my channel. That's just me closing some ink from a previous video, which I think you guys are going to love as well. And this video is not 100% color theory, but it's also like got a little bit of color theory in here. And I really think that this is a very important thing that we need to actually understand as artists or aspiring artists, is that colors matter. And you don't necessarily have to have a big palette like mine in order to mix a very big range of colors. You can have your 6-7 go-to colors and that's enough. So guys, for this video, I have cleaned this palette, which has basically never ever been cleaned, I think in, I don't even know how many years. I only clean this when I go to events so that I don't look like a little piggy, but this paint basically stays on here. And the reason why is because over the years I've learned which colors I like to mix certain colors, and I've kind of built like a muscle memory for mixing my own colors. The first one that we're going to mix is a basic color palette. This consists out of red, blue and yellow. I did not find a red that I thought was neutral enough for this exercise, so I mixed a couple of reds together until I found one that wasn't too yellow or too blue. The second color is yellow, and the colors that I use are all available in the Mungyo set. So the first color was a red mix from all the reds there. The second color is 804 yellow, and third color is 819 cobalt blue. Now, you guys will see that throughout this video, I like to clean my brush consistently. Because we're mixing very specific colors, I want the pigment to be as clean as possible. For instance, when I mix the red and the yellow, I want to have an orange. So I'm going to make sure that the blue is wiped completely from my brush. Otherwise, you're going to get milky, murky, brown shades that we don't actually want as of yet. Now, something that's also very important to understand is your colors will differ depending on the quality of your watercolors, and also depending on which brands you use. Not all brand colors are the same. The first color that we're mixing is purple, and as you can see, the purple is a little bit murky. It's because the red is still predominantly brown. Not necessarily brown, but it's because it's still got that predominant brown tinge to it. And so, which means that the red kind of just has a lot of yellow in it still. And then as you see, when you add the red and to a blue dominated mix, you get like almost like an indigo color. The second color is orange. Now this orange was a pretty good orange. It's like a narchi type orange. And as you add more red, it kind of just goes to like a mango red, you know, like a mango type of thing. And something that I want you to do is when you mix a color, associate it with something. For instance, a majority yellow and red mix, so let's say majority yellow would kind of be like a narchi red, like a narchi red yellow orange color. Now the next color I'm mixing is some good old green, and here I made a mistake. I placed my green incorrectly, but that's okay because we're just practicing. But green is very interesting. Green can be, for me, something that it's a very interesting color to mix. I don't like mixing just green and blue, or just yellow and blue. I like to always add a little bit of brown, or if I don't feel lazy, I'll just pick up some red somewhere on my palette and I'll add that in there. And another cool thing that I also like you to think about is when you think about color palettes as well, what am I going to use for my artwork? Sometimes a good place to start is just by using colors that are harmonious already from your palette. For instance, orange from yellow to red, you've got a beautiful color harmony, and it's from red to blue, you've got a different color harmony. So these are just things you can always, that trains you while you mix your colors. The second color that we're going to use is based on printer ink colors. Now, I don't know if you see, like when you print, when your ink is low, it'll say CMYK, Y is low, your Y cartridge is low. The dogs are going crazy again. And so for this, I'm going to use cyan, magenta, and yellow. So I'm going to look for colors that are very similar to those colors, and then I'm going to mix with that. So for the red, instead of using red, I'm going to use Opera, and the number is 841. And then for blue, I'm going to still use yellow and cobalt blue because I was quite happy with the selection the first round. I think that there are very neutral colors to mix with. And already when you mix this palette, just by switching out the Opera with the red, already your palette changes so much. Because the Opera is very pink, you get a very bright and radiant pigment. And so when you mix a purple, you're going to have like a bright purple. It's not going to be the red version, which has a little bit of a yellow tinge to it, which makes your painting, which makes your mix go murky. And so something that I also like about mixing using magenta as my red color is that the colors are, like I said, more vibrant first of all, but you actually get colors that are more true to what you want to mix versus using just a standard red like cadmium red or red, just straight red. And like I said, this is something that you'll learn after a while. So for instance, the purples are now like very happy and they're bright, and you've got like a beautiful, I want to say violet, a beautiful purple. And then again, the greens will pretty much stay the same because we're using the same palette, which is yellow, the same yellows. But then the transition from the yellow to the Opera again, when you mix those colors there, I feel like this is my favorite color palette at the moment, because you've got like this beautiful happy orange transition, and the pink, like the majority mix where you've got more Opera than yellow. It's like the most prettiest pinky peachy color that I have ever seen. And that's a color I use quite a lot. And there's actually not a color like that in paint mixes. So that's a very nice color to just like have in your palette. And you can't buy that color, but now you can mix it. So I have now actually mixed a color that I think I would be using quite often in my artworks again. And again, this is just an exercise. It doesn't have to be perfect. Your consistency from blue to green doesn't have to have this beautiful harmony. It should just be you practicing how to mix color. Because at the end of the day, the more you do it, the more you'll get into it and the more you'll understand. And for instance, my husband always laughs at me because he's like, can you give me the pink cup? I'm like, it's not pink, it's yellowish pink, or it's peach, or it's... I like to name colors because it teaches my brain to observe what is that color. It's not just pink. That color looks a little bit more orangey to me, so I'm gonna say it's like a peachy pink or a yellowy pink. For instance, when I buy stuff for my house, I love the color yellow. I'd always be like, is it the lemon yellow or is it a mustard yellow? What is the yellow? Because I'm training my brain to observe and interpret color so that when I want to mix it, I can put it down and I can visually communicate what I've been observing. A lot of times when, as artists or as aspiring artists, we say, I'm struggling to get the color right, or I'm struggling with this. It's because we don't observe. We want to just have a color mixed and there we go. But when you start observing, even with drawing, the more you look, the more you see, the better your art will become. And it's the same with mixing colors. Look at the color. Is this green, or is this red, or is this, what type of red? Is it a warm red? Is it a cool red? Is it an orange red? Is it a yellow red? Okay, so the next palette is a primary variation. So I'm going to use a red, but I'm going to use a different red. I'm going to use a blue and a yellow, but I'm going to use it different shades of red. So for instance, for red, I'm just going to use permanent red. For yellow, I'm going to use a yellow ochre, and for blue, I'm going to use indigo. Now, the recipe that I'm teaching you now is having a red, a yellow, and a blue. Having those three colors always consistent in your artwork will allow you to focus on what you're mixing. For instance, you know when you want to mix oranges, you're going to definitely use a red or a yellow. Red and yellow combination. You know when you want to mix purples, you're going to use a blue and red combination. You know when you want to mix greens, green and yellow. Okay, so let's start with just adding our primary colors. And again, I like to start with this because it gives me a place to work to. And so also something that's very interesting, if you add a complementary color to a primary color, for instance red, if you add green to red, you're going to darken red and it will eventually become brown, because complementary colors, they tend to soften the primary pigment. Okay, so I'm going to just add my primary colors in there, which is permanent red, yellow ochre and indigo. It's important to also, when you mix colors, remember what you're mixing. That's why I left space at the bottom for you guys to write it down, so that you can really get into the habit of mixing colors by their names. For instance, this permanent red and indigo kind of makes like a moody purple. So this would be a very moody palette because the colors that I chose are also very moody. Yellow ochre is a moody ochre. It's a moody yellow. And so you'll see the transition from the blue and red mix to red becomes more maroon, and the transition from the purple to the blue becomes more indigo. And so, okay, the next color that we are mixing is, of course, some red with yellow ochre. And so, yellow ochre, interesting color. One of my favorite colors to use also, because yellow ochre has very interesting, I want to say, what do I say? Very interesting things to it. Not things, that's not the word. Very interesting characteristics to it. It's not like your typical yellow, which is very bright and transparent. Yellow ochre tends to be a little bit more murky. And so you'll see when you mix colors with it, it tends to change the opacity of the color. Another reason why I like yellow ochre is because yellow ochre is one of the perfect colors to use as an undertone for mixing in skin tones. For instance, what I would normally start with is yellow ochre with a little bit of blue and a little bit of red. That would be my base on which I work. If I want to skip the blue and the red mix, I would add some raw sienna and Van Dyke brown to that mix. Okay, now, by just doing this exercise, you'll see with the next colors you've just learned to mix an olive color. So next time you maybe want to add a vintage olive pigment, but you don't know where to start, you've got this little reference to show you, I know actually how to mix olive, and it is a combination of indigo and yellow ochre. But it's an indigo yellow ochre combination which leans more towards yellow ochre. So I know that the next time I'm going to mix a like olivey color, I'm going to start with a predominantly yellow ochre base and then just add a little bit of indigo in there until I find a color that I like. Okay, so for this color mixing wheel chart thingamajiggy, I am just going to mix complementary colors. Now this is very interesting because with this color mixing scheme, we are actually going to mix quite a variety of browns, and very interesting browns. For instance, like a purple brown, a more of a green brown, a yellowy, orangey brown. Very interesting. And you kind of learn these things when you actually focus on mixing colors and you play around. Sometimes what I would like to do, I would take two very completely different colors and see what colors I can mix with them. Sometimes I get brown, sometimes I get lucky, and I just end up mixing a ton of beautiful shades of paint. Okay, so the colors that I'm using is purple, orange, and greenish yellow. Now greenish yellow is an interesting color. I actually don't know, like it's green but it's not green, and it's not yellow but it's not yellow. It's just a beautiful color. Now again, if you look at this color palette, I'm using purple to replace red, I'm using orange to replace yellow, and I'm using green to replace my blue color. So I'm still working in my 3-color ratio, and I'm trying to pick colors that would resemble yellow. So orange is pretty close to yellow. Purple is not exactly yellow, but purple has red in it. So it's not, purple is not exactly red, but it has red in it, so I'm going for it. And then the greenish yellow color is not exactly blue, but it's got blue in it, so that's cool for mixing purposes and for this exercise. Okay, so I want to show you, for instance, that what happens when you add orange and greenish yellow together. You kind of get this beautiful browny color, but it's not brown. It has this yellow undertone because the orange is very strong compared to just the greenish yellow. And so this is, for me, one of the funnest things to do. I would actually sit the whole day and mix colors because my brain kind of goes crazy when I see the interactions they have with each other and how they influence each other. For instance, a predominantly purple with a little bit of greenish yellow makes a very interesting purple color. And a predominantly purple with a little bit of orange also makes a very interesting purple color. It's like a mauvey color, but it's more yellowy than the mauvey one you would find if you add greenish yellow to it. And sometimes you're gonna mix browns, but even you actually want to mix those browns, because in mixing those browns you learn how to mix browns. I just said brown too much, but I even love browns because, like I said, again, browns, they're actually very stunning colors if you know how to use them. And if you know how to mix them. For instance, you know that very murky, muddy brown color that we always get when we mess up our mixing? You don't get that when you just understand, unless you want to mix it, but when you understand color theory and everything else. And something else that I also really feel that is important to note with mixing colors, that not all colors will eventually be mixed. You will never ever be able to mix a color 100%. But it's not about mixing it 100%, I feel it's about mixing it 90%. So if it's almost the same, it's good enough, because your eye will interpret it as the color you want it to be. Okay, so at the end I'll just show you a full image of the final artwork. And for this one, I'm going to show you how to mix colors using harmonious colors. Now this is one of my favorite ones to use. The 3 colors that I'm going to be using is basically the colors that I like to combine in most of my artworks. And for this exercise, I'm going to be using the same principle. I'm going to have a red, a blue, and a yellow. And I'm going to use the same mixing principle as combining the 2 primary colors to mix a palette with this. So the first color that I'm going to start with is Opera, and that will be my red substitute. The second color is Purple, and that will be my blue substitute. And the third color is Orange, and that would be my yellow substitute. Now this is a very, very fun way of learning the interactions that colors have with each other. When you do it this way as well, what happens is you kind of also teach yourself how these colors would interact with each other when you do something like a wet on wet watercolor blending technique. It's very interesting to note how colors react with each other, because that will also transform your artworks. For instance, if you know that, let's say, what color can we use? Greenish yellow does not like purple. You won't use them together unless you want to create the color that those two would create together. Sometimes I also think of color this way. You know, when you bake a cake and you add your ingredients, there are certain ingredients that you can add together and they will work. For instance, like the other day I baked a cake and I messed it up because I didn't see that the instructions says that you can't add, you have to add the baking powder afterwards, otherwise it makes a mess. You'll still get a cake, but the cake won't be perfect. You can add orange to yellowish green or whatever you want, but your result might not be the way you like it to be. That's why playing around with colors like this, just sitting and observing the colors, observing how they interact with each other, observing, for instance, do they change the tone of the color, or do they kind of just, for instance, sometimes I would add a color to paint. For instance, let's say I want to add a brown to green. Now, you can add brown to green and you're gonna get like an olivey color. But let's say I want to keep it more green, then I'll just add variations of either blue or green to it to keep it still in a green palette and have it move away from brown. So depending on what you want to achieve with your color, it's very important to also just focus on colors themselves. And the more you do it, the better it's going to be. So the next part of this is I'm just literally blending out the colors to see how they would look when they are lighter. That's a whole different ballgame. Understanding that watercolor goes lighter the more water you add. And if you add white, it tends to make the pigment become a little bit more milky. And so for me, I don't know if I've said this enough, but I really am obsessed with watercolors because they kind of are like a no fuss, no mess material. You don't need a lot of knowledge to enjoy this medium. And so this is me cleaning my palette again because I'm committed. I'm committed to doing a video with beautiful pigments. And I must say, when I first started with watercolors, I didn't enjoy the medium a lot because I felt like it was very messy. I have very little control over it. But as soon as you realize that there are things that you can control, for instance, like the consistency of your watercolors, the water that you use, mixing the colors, the type of brush, the paper, watercolor becomes a very interesting medium to use. And so as you see while I've been mixing this is a beautiful color palette on its own. You've got warm browns because the purple that we used is still predominantly warm. And you've got this warm autumn palette of oranges transitioning into this beautiful pink opera and then transitioning again into a brown that eventually links in with your orange. Now, when your colors are predominantly warm, you won't have a lot of blues in there. So this is a super warm palette. This is like a warm, cozy autumn color palette that's full of purples and pinks and like your raw sienna colors. And looking at, once the sheet is complete, you'll see that the colors that you can actually mix with just these three colors are so vibrant and beautiful. And what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to speed this video up, and then you guys can just see me mix a ton of colors. Or not speed it up, I'm going to zoom it in and speed it up and speed it up, and then I will chat to you after that. Okay, bye. hopefully by this time now you will be obsessed with mixing colors just as much as I am. And something that I can also give advice on, for instance, if you are starting out and you want to buy a watercolor palette, this is a good way to buy a small one, which is a little bit less expensive than these bigger ones, but buy a better quality palette. When you purchase a palette with, let's say, only 12 standard colors, if you practice mixing these types of colors together, you will soon find that you can most of the time mix all the colors that are available in this big set that I have. And this just comes with practice. Another good thing about this as well is when you mix colors, you actually start to analyze colors. So when you use these colors in your artworks, you already know, for instance, like if I use the orange and yellow, greenish yellow together, I'm gonna get a brown palette, and I do not want brown in my artwork. Where if I opt for something like cobalt blue and opera, I'm gonna get more like purplies and more happy colors. So that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember to subscribe to my channel and like this video. Also, let me know what you struggle with regards to mixing colors in the section below, and then I will get back to you and maybe I can help you. Okay, bye!